Good afternoon, everybody. Very warm welcome to our webinar on the future of gambling in Brazil. I cannot think of a more timely webinar than this session today on one of the most closely watched emerging markets in the global online gambling industry. And I also can't think of two better speakers to join me today to share their insights with what is a very fast-moving situation. Not only have our speakers, who I will introduce you to momentarily, been gracious enough to give up their time and share their insights on the emerging Brazilian market, they are also putting themselves in the hot seat by joining us today about 16 hours after legislation was amended and approved in Brazil's Senate last night. So this unique opportunity to receive latest intelligence and latest insight on what is a very fast-moving picture. I'll briefly introduce Vixio to those of you joining us today who aren't already familiar with us. Vixio Regulatory Intelligence is a leading provider of policy information, legal and compliance requirements, and market data and forecasts on the entire global online gambling market. We help leading operators and suppliers, among other stakeholders in the industry, to understand and compare rules and requirements across different markets globally and prepare for future changes, including the opening of new markets such as Brazil. If you're not familiar with Vixio, then please visit vixio.com or contact us for more information, and we'll be delighted to share it with you. As a matter of housekeeping, after a series of questions that I will be putting to our expert panel, we will be trying to get around to as many of your questions as possible. You are able to add a question to our panel in the chat box, and please feel free to do so, and we will try to get round to as many of them as time allows. Moving on, why are we here? Well, Brazil, it's fair to say, has been one of the great untapped markets of the global gambling industry. We don't have time to give you the full background of the legal state of play in Brazil, but we'll primarily be talking today about Bill 3626/2023, which was introduced by Brazil's government this summer to finally implement an earlier law on fixed odds betting. We have seen that bill evolve considerably in recent weeks, most notably perhaps when it was approved by the lower house of Brazil's Congress in September and expanded beyond just sports betting to include online casino games or iGaming. As we'll be discussing today, again, as of about 16 hours ago, that bill has also been approved in Brazil's Senate. Senators have made several notable and favorable changes regarding tax and licensing terms, among other things, but have only approved the bill yesterday after agreeing to adopt an amendment to remove online casino or iGaming from the scope of the legislation. This bill 3626/2023 will now be going back to the Chamber of Deputies, the lower house of Brazil's Congress, before being sent over to the desk of President Lula to either sign into law or veto in part, or much less likely in full. I will introduce our expert panel, and as I say, I cannot think of anybody better to discuss this fast-moving situation than Rafael Marchetti Marcondes and Luis Felipe Maia. Rafael is the Chief Legal Officer for Rei do Pitaco. If you haven't heard of Rei do Pitaco, it's referred to in some quarters as the Brazilian DraftKings, in the sense that it's a fast-growing and increasingly popular provider of fantasy sports games in Brazil. It's also preparing for a regulated sports betting market. In addition to Rafael's responsibilities for Rei do Pitaco, he's also the legal director for the Brazilian Institute for Responsible Gaming, IBJR, which is an association representing leading local and international betting operators with interest in the Brazilian market. And he serves in a similar role for ABRADIE, which is a newly formed Brazilian Sports Integrity Association, and is also the president of Brazil's Fantasy Sports Association. Joining Rafael will be Luis Felipe Maia. Luis is a founding partner of Maia Yoshiyasu Advogados law firm based in Sao Paulo. Luis, is fair to say, is one of the foremost gaming law experts in Brazil, having advised Brazilian and international companies on all matters of gambling law and policy for well over a decade. Rafael and Luis, muito obrigado, bem-vindos. Thank you for joining us today. I think we'll get straight into some questions if you're all set. Well,
no, James, go ahead, because we have like lots of.
we certainly do.
Just say it's a pleasure to be here with Vixio and all your audience. I'm happy to be here to share a little bit of my first impressions of everything that is happening, and congratulations for the perfect timing for this event.
Yeah, we're at the mercy of the Senate and the Senate President, but this seemed to work out in the end. We'll dive straight in, and that's exactly where we've got to start, really. As of last night, Bill 3626 was approved by the Senate, but as I mentioned, no longer is iGaming or online casino part of the picture in the version of the legislation as approved by the Senate. I was hoping to get both of your reactions to last night's activity in the Senate, and then related to that, if I've understood the process correctly, because the bill can go back to the lower house, the Chamber of Deputies, it's possible, at least theoretically, that iGaming could go back into the bill. The deputies could choose to do that. So I guess two questions: your reactions to the outcome in the Senate, and then your thoughts on how likely, how possible is it that this is not the end of the story for online gaming, and we may even, is it possible we will see this come back into the bill in the lower chamber? Raphael, I don't know if you want to kick us off with your first impressions.
Okay. I think that it was I have like mixed feelings, I could say, because for one side I'm happy because I see that the bill is moving on, going forward. So this is very important, and we may highlight that we have had like a few important wins yesterday, especially concerning the taxation over the operator, over the prices payments, and a few other things that we may discuss deeper along this panel. But I think that this is the upside of the story. But I may confess that it was kind of disappointing having the iGaming not approved by the Senate. I was like there following the session, and I think that even the government was expecting the bill's approval with iGaming. They know that's very important for them in terms of revenues and consequently taxes. So I think that in this aspect is something that it was kind of surprising for us, for the market and even the government, even knowing that there was some resistance from some detractor senators there. So I think that the regular expectation would be like winning this, like having the legalization of iGaming for a difference of 10 votes and not the opposite as it happened today, yesterday. So this is like my very initial perception of these.
Luis, your reaction?
Yeah, I share the same feelings. I think it was, as Raphael said, it's a bittersweet sentiment because we are happy that it was finally approved by the Senate, especially after the government withdrew the urgency request on the bill. So it's good to see that it's still moving on, and that we have theoretically a chance to have it approved until the end of the year. We knew that we were going to face the discussion for online gaming. We knew that Senator Girão and Portinho were leading this process to have online gaming excluded from the bill. Several senators who said they would vote in favor of online gaming didn't show up for the vote. And it's not the time to find who to blame. I think we have lessons learned in terms of political articulation and being ready for these kind of movements. And now we have to rely on the chamber. The positive aspect is that the chamber can still approve the bill with online gaming included. And the fact that they had already approved the bill with online gaming is a positive factor. We will only know it for sure after the approval from the Chamber of Deputies. And I think the key question here, besides whether it's going to be approved or not, is how long the Chamber of Deputies will take to put this matter into vote. Now that it's not an urgent bill anymore, we all expect this to be treated urgently by the Chamber, but there's no guarantee.
Rafael, what are your early view really of the likelihood of iGaming online casino being reinserted into the legislation in the Chamber of Deputies? Is that something that you think is a strong possibility, or?
James, I would say that there is a strong possibility. I'm very optimistic with that, especially because the insertion of iGaming in the text was done initially by the Chamber of Deputies. So I do believe that this rejection from the Senate can be changed, but it's not gonna be a very easy task. A lot of negotiation will be involved in that. You can be sure of that. So let's see. I still keep the optimism about that. And just a fun fact here from yesterday, I can say fun, but sometimes it's even complicated to say that, because a few senators that vote, they vote wrongly. So because you have to choose yes or no. So no was rejecting iGaming, and no was keeping iGaming on the bill, and yes, removing it. Cajuru, that's one of the leaders and the reporter of the bill.
Supporter of the legislation. Yeah.
He has done like his whole speech saying that iGaming should keep in the bill, and the moment he voted wrongly, so he chose the wrong option, and the same occurred with like 3 more senators. So probably the difference would be even smaller, but just a funny, sad curiosity about yesterday.
The Congress goes on recess on December 22nd, and I believe is not back until February. Do we expect the Chamber of Deputies to act on the bill next week before the Christmas recess? And is it, or would it be better for the Chamber to wait so that the industry has more time to make the case for iGaming going back in the bill? If the lower house moves faster, would it be more likely to just accept Senate amendments? What's your take on the timeline and what we should expect in the lower house? Luis, you want to?
So for budget reasons, it's important for the government that this is approved until the end of the year. Okay, so I think we will see some lobbying from the government itself to try to put it to vote until the end of the year. Of course, this decision relies solely on the Speaker of the House, Deputado Arthur Lira. So honestly, I don't know. I think it's possible it's feasible, but it will depend on his personal decision. And as Rafael said, you have a lot of negotiations going on before that decision is actually taken.
Rafael, you agree with that? Do you think that there will be a push to get the Chamber to vote on this in the next few days, or what's your view?
Yeah, yes, I do agree that there is grounds for that, but we are like very tight in terms of time, because like basically we have 1 week and there are lots and lots of things that the deputies may vote. This morning I was like at the Chamber of Deputies, and the the first impressions that I could take from them is that it's tight. The time is very tight. The text it's not ready till the moment, so it was not released for the Chamber of the Deputies. It may occur till the end of this week, I do believe. And of course, the government lobby started the moment it was rejected. I could note it. But the government will have to make like many concessions to the deputies, and especially to Lira, that's the president of the deputies, in a way that he prioritize this project that we know that has its relevance, especially concerning the revenues that the government intend to count on the next year. But I don't know. I will keep like optimistic, and I do think that for the industry would be better having a resolution about the bill this year. I think that all the adjustments that needs to be made are kind of mature for the operators and all the stakeholders. So I don't think that we would need additional time to work with the deputies. Actually, the job is already ongoing. We are already talking with everybody to see if they can change, especially this iGaming aspect, and doing this for now, for next week.
Okay. Well, it sounds like this is definitely a live one, and going to be a moving target for the next next 7 or 8 days or so.
Yeah, I think it's important to mention that there was an intense communication between Senator Angelo Coronel and Arthur Lira and Deputado Adolfo Viana, who was the rapporteur at the chamber.
Yes, so just for the purposes of the audience, you're referring to the rapporteur, or kind of the chief author of the bill in the Senate, the equivalent chief author in the House, and with the president of the chamber.
Exactly. Exactly. So
this bill has already been developed.
Yeah, the coordination was in a way that the bill would be ready to be approved at the chamber without lots of changes. So I think basically the discussion at the chamber now will rely on online gaming, on the taxation, because the chamber was not very satisfied with the reduction of the taxes on the operator. And then we have the 20% national equity in the company that might be subject to discussion.
We will dive into some of those other issues other than iGaming if we can. And I did trying as we can to set aside iGaming and online casino as being in or out of the legislation. Picking up on a point you raised, Raphael, this legislation began early in the summer here in the Northern Hemisphere. Sports betting only, headline tax rate of 18% of GGR, with additional taxes taking that north of 30%, and a winnings tax on players. I think 30% of all winnings above about $400 to 2,000 reais, more or less. But what we've now seen coming out of the Senate with the iGaming issue set aside there, we're looking now at a 12% tax rate rather than 18%. The ability for operators to offer multiple skins or brands under a license, a longer license term, potentially some flexibility for the government to reduce the license fee or charge less than 30 million reais. And then the winnings tax has the structure of that has been improved, shall we say. The tax on the player winnings of 15% on a net basis, so winnings, losses deducted from winnings every year. So it does seem as though this legislation has evolved, and in a good way, but most in the industry, setting aside the iGaming issue. So I guess the question really is, if this is a sports betting only market under those terms, what's your view on the legislation and whether Brazil will have a successful regulated market under this bill as approved by the Senate if it's sports betting only?
Good question.
Rafael, are we set up for success with or without iGaming here? What's your take on that?
I think that you summarized quite well, James. The approval of the bill by the Federal Senate has many advances. Most of them, I would say, concern taxation. So these reductions that we could observe make the market much more interesting for the operators and even the players. Like the Senate was able to reduce tax over operations and prices, proposing more affordable rates, which allows Brazil to be a very positive global standard, at least in my perspective, concerning just sports betting. However, not allowing the iGaming in Brazil, I see that is something that can put in risk the channeling. I say that because once almost all the offshore operators offer in Brazil not only sports betting but also iGaming, and more than that, on an average, iGaming represents around 70% of the revenues of these operators, according to an estimative that we have in IBJR. So by not approving the iGaming, many operators may opt for not joining the regulated market, which puts in risk the efficiency of the local license and also can frustrate the government expectations with tax collection. So these are a few things that call my attention, and I think that the Chamber of Deputies still has the opportunity, as we just said, of reinserting iGaming in the bill and legalizing the activity in Brazil. Not only the market, but also the government hope that the lower house has a broader understanding of the impacts of not regulating iGaming.
Luis, there was a recent licensing ordinance that was published by the Ministry of Finance, and part of that was a request for expressions of interest in a license. I believe 134 operators submitted notice of their intent to apply for a license in Brazil as of a few weeks ago, albeit at a time when the current state of play of the Senate bill did include online casino. A question really is, do you think that all of those 130 plus operators will proceed with entering the market if online gaming is not part of the framework?
Honestly, I don't think all those operators would enter the market even if online gaming is kept in the bill. Okay, we have to keep in mind that if we consider the license at 30 million reais, which is equivalent to $6 million, it's still probably the most expensive license of the world. If this license doesn't allow the operator to offer online casino games, then it's very hard to justify this kind of investment for a 5-year license without any track record of blocking the offshore market. And it will be very hard for the Brazilian companies to compete against offshore operators without being allowed to offer bonuses, because the bill doesn't allow the operators to offer bonuses, without offering casino games, and without the cross incentives between casinos and sports betting. Because at the end of the day, the operator that has both products is allowed to he can offer more competitive odds than those whose revenues depend only on sports betting. So answering your question, I think if the online game is not included, this will compromise the channeling of the market to the regulated market. I think I still have hope that it's going to be amended by the Chamber of Deputies, because I think it may be a no-go for several operators.
You also raised a couple of other challenges beyond the license fee and cross-sell ban on bonuses. One of those you mentioned was under the Senate bill, each operator would be required to be 20% owned at least, I think, by Brazilian investors. That's something I wanted to ask you about, really, and how challenging do you think that, where do you think that's come from, and how challenging do you think that will be for the market?
It's hard to say where it comes from. You see the laws and sausages, it's better if you don't know how they're made.
Yeah.
And but this is a very odd provision. In our understanding, this is not constitutional. It goes against the Brazilian constitution, and it will be most probably challenged by several applicants at court. I think all companies, they have good legal grounds to challenge the legality of that provision if that is approved by the Chamber of Deputies.
Rafael, you have any thoughts around the local investor requirement, whether you see that as an impediment to the market? Or
I do agree with Luis in the sense that this requirement makes no sense. There is no legal grounds for that. Besides being unconstitutional, it's against several international treaties that Brazil has. For example, there are many treaties that were signed by the country that forbids market reserve for locals. So this is something that may be challenged if kept in the bill. And the reason why this appears here, in my opinion, is of course lobby, and we cannot carve on the stone, but seems to come from local, not local operators. We don't have local operators nowadays because everything is offshore, but from Brazilians that intends to explore the market, so they are trying to protect themselves from foreign companies. So that's my view, but as I said, we cannot carve on stone.
I was going to rattle through a couple of other features of the bill that get your take on, and perhaps our audience today might not necessarily be aware of. If I'm not mistaken, another Senate amendment would require use of facial recognition for ID verification. I'm not personally aware of that being a requirement in any other market globally, at least for online gaming rather than land-based casino. How viable do you think that is as a policy and requirement?
Honestly, I think, with all due respect, I think the Congress is overstepping. I think this is the kind of operational detail that should be determined by the regulator, not by the law. Okay, nowadays they consider facial recognition as the state of art in terms of fraud prevention and identification or security. That may not be the case in 5 years or 10 years. And the law will be there demanding facial recognition. So I don't think facial recognition in Brazil, because of the high level of fraud that we have in Brazil, and also to protect minors, is a bad idea. I just think the law is not the place to have it set in stone. I think if that's the intention for the regulator to put an additional layer of protection, that's okay. It's up to the regulator, but not to the legislator.
Rafael, I was going to ask, Luis raised this, but there is language in the bill, both as approved in the lower house and in the Senate, that would appear to ban bonus offers and incentives. Obviously, that's a common marketing technique of sports betting companies globally, certainly in the current unregulated market. Do you think are there any possibilities of a workaround to that? And what do you think around that language that restricts bonus offers in the bill?
James, here I think that it's important for us to try to understand the legislator mind here. And the purpose of the restriction that was proposed it was to avoid credit offering to the players. This was the main concern and becomes clear from the examples mentioned in the bill. In my perspective, the reference made to the bonus was done mistakenly, and we had like a few conversations with the Minister of Finance, and they agree with that perception. So like we've been working with them in a few ordinances, and this is a subject that has already come, and we've been discussing. Maybe a workaround could be done by means of an ordinance from the ministry, and like changing a little bit or having an interpretation from what is said in the bill. But technically speaking, this is not the best way to do it. It would be better not having this prohibition in the bill. Once it is already approved, we don't have how to change this anymore. At least maybe the president in a veto, but I have my doubts that this would happen. So the ordinance for me seems the best workaround. I don't know if Luis agrees, but this might.
No, I agree, Rafael, and I think a very reasonable interpretation of that provision is that no welcoming bonuses would be allowed, but you could, once the player is already a client, you would be able to offer some promotions or some bonuses or some free bets. I think the intention of the legislator there was to preventing people from being attracted by large bonuses, large welcoming bonuses. So I think we will only have any assurance on what the correct interpretation is once the regulator issues the ordinances regarding marketing. But I know those discussions are already taking place.
I think we can look somewhat past the legislative process, which, as we've said, is a fluid situation. I was going to ask around how we see implementation of the licensing regime, whether that be just for sports or for sports plus iGaming, how we see that playing out in 2024. Luis, another change I think made in the Senate is it looks like there is now a 6-month transition period. Does that mean we can potentially expect for licensing in roughly mid 2024? And do you think that's sort of enough? Is a 6-month window enough time to put everything into place?
I think this transition period is extremely important because we have several sponsorship agreements in place in Brazil. Several media companies, they are relying on the revenues from advertising, payment service providers, and we cannot create a situation where the operators that are legally operating from offshore now may be penalized by continuing to operate when the licenses are not available. Also, once the license become available, the government will need some time to analyze all the documents and grant the licenses. So I think the 6-month period from the time when the license become available is very important, and I think it was a very good decision to include it in the law. I think technically there may be some discussion regarding when some provisions, specifically some provisions regarding advertising and payments, will become enforceable. I think the law could be more clear in that sense, that those provisions will not be applicable until this transition period is over.
Yeah, you mean a prohibition on advertising of unlicensed sites and prohibition on payment processing of unlicensed operators. It's not, the transition period is doesn't expressly state when new legal mechanisms come into force. Is that's what you're?
Yeah, but I think at the end of the day, this will be something that is being discussed with the regulator, and I think if necessary to bring legal security to this whole process, we may expect the regulator to do something about it.
Rafael, we refer to a regulator and also to the Ministry of Finance. Obviously, Brazil doesn't have a gaming commission, pre-existing gambling regulator that sports betting and online gaming will be rolled into. I guess for your insight really on how will regulation and licensing actually function? Will this be run by a specialist body under the Ministry of Finance? What's your what should people expect in terms of which government department does what in this area?
Nowadays, we don't have here the figure of an agency that could be very important. I think maybe in the near future, especially if we have like iGaming and other verticals approved by the Congress. But the way it is now, inside the Ministry of Finance, we have a special department that is in charge of sweepstakes, lotteries, and sports betting, and we don't know, even maybe iGaming. The staff is basically divided between these activities, and of course, sports betting is the area where we have like where it's gonna be more concentrated. Like we will have more staff. Let's say this due to the size of the market and the complexity of it. So this is basically the structure, but currently, like we have basically 10 people working on that. The expectations is to have like around 66 people on this department, but we still don't have it. So something that we have to be aware, because the people don't come. They don't have like how to speed up the licensing process.
Okay. Let's ask you, Luis, if there's any. We've spoken about provisions that are specific to this legislation. I wonder if you have any other thoughts that those on this webinar, many will be based outside of Brazil, whether in operators or suppliers in the gambling industry. What other compliance challenges do you think those international companies should be aware of in terms of doing business in Brazil generally, outside of outside of the specifics of this legislation that we're talking about?
Sure. I think there are two critical aspects of that can be expected for any operator willing to do business in Brazil. I think the first one is tax planning, where they need to do some international tax planning ASAP. Most companies, they are considering operating in Brazil and having some offshore structure providing services to the Brazilian company. The import of services, of technical services in Brazil is extremely expensive and tax inefficient. In a nutshell, for a Brazilian company, for the offshore service provider to receive 100 euros, it costs for the Brazilian company something around 140. So companies will need to keep that in mind and do some real good tax planning, not to be caught in these specific details of the Brazilian tax system. And I think the other issue is all the consumer protection apparatus that we have in Brazil. Companies in Brazil are mass service or product companies in Brazil. They are subject to a very high level of litigation. We're talking about thousands of consumer claims that can be expected by the online gaming operators. Right now, the players, they don't have the ability to target the operators because they are offshore. It's very hard for them to file a lawsuit and get them subpoenaed outside of Brazil. Once these companies apply for a license and they have their local entities in Brazil, they can expect thousands of consumer claims. And this is no exaggeration. It's if you see telecom companies in Brazil, if you see Facebook, Google, technology companies, they have thousands of lawsuits because we have a very peculiar legal system where any consumer claim under 40 minimum wages, and now we're talking about something around roughly almost $10,000. Okay, they can file those claims in the small matters courts. They don't have to pay any fees, any court fees, and if they lose, they don't have to pay any legal fees at all. And they get it one day out of work to go to court. So there's no risk for the consumer to make a claim, and the company needs to bear all the costs of that lawsuit, even if they win.
That's very helpful. Yeah, these are things that are non-specific, I guess, to the gaming sector, but seem to be very pertinent questions for companies to consider now. I am going to pick up on some questions that have been shared by our audience. In no particular order, really. Start with one quickly for you, because we are for you, Luis, because we are short on time. In the legislation, if I'm not mistaken, there is no particular regulation or licensing or requirements for B2B suppliers. The question here has been, is that the case, and what should suppliers expect? Can we see some sort of registration process for suppliers, or do you think that will be a market without direct requirements for providers?
So, let's keep in mind that when this bill was drafted, it was meant for sports betting only. And there is a big difference between the liabilities that come from a sports betting platform supplier and those who come from an online gaming supplier. I think it can be expected, and that the regulator can impose that. If online gaming is approved, I think it's reasonable to expect some kind of, if not a B2B license, at least a B2B certification for suppliers. I think licensing is the most likely scenario, but at least I think we can expect some kind of mandatory certification or accreditation by online gaming suppliers. They will need to check the random number generator. They will need to check the integrity of the game. And that's what happens in most regulated markets. I think we will not be very different from that.
So it's fair to say we don't know today based on the legislation, but it's possible that we could see registrations or even licensing introduced via a regulatory ordinance in the future.
Yeah.
Rafael, I was going to ask you about advertising. I believe this is an area that IBJR, the association in particular, is focused on. It appears as though both the lower house and the Senate have not approved heavy-handed restrictions or prohibitions on advertising. Our question here is, what are the specifics of the legislation around advertising? I wonder if you could maybe expand on the role of CONAR, the advertising standards authority in Brazil, and what IBGR and others are doing in terms of industry standards in that area.
James, here I think that IBGR took a very important position. The moment the institute was created, jointly it was thought about self-regulation. So we create our own code, and after the following movement was to reach CONAR and propose them to work together to improve our code and like trying to enforce the idea. And I think that we were kind of well succeeded on that. It was created a working group between CONAR and our institute and other trades associations, not involving just only operators, but also media and television. So I think that the result of the job is a very good and balanced self-regulation code that should be released in the next weeks. We may expect that. And I think that another very positive aspect of that is that the Minister of Finance decided to support the initiative. So by doing this, like, we were more reliable, we got more confident on doing this. And I think that in this code, the main issues of the market are being well addressed without some very high requirements that sometimes are unachievable, such as one of them that were discussed yesterday. For example, they want to prohibit the advertisement on arenas. So this was very concerning for the market, and I think that the best way is to have something on a code by means of self-regulation. I think that much more flexible. It's a market that's always changing, so we can adapt faster without some like some very extreme.
To clarify, as things stand today, this looks like being Brazil looks like having a self-regulatory industry code for gambling advertising that can evolve via the industry and via media companies in time. And I think you mentioned there was a group of senators that pushed for prohibitions on advertising in sports arenas and for sponsorship, but that amendment that was filed was defeated. So as it stands today, the legislation is not prohibitive when it comes to advertising. I think probably the language in there is in line with international markets that
yes, exactly that. I think that yesterday we have a few defeats when we think about iGaming, but it was a huge victory because we know the importance of these kind of measure for the market. And the ordinance that was already released by the Minister of Finance recognized self-regulation as a way to be done the restrictions on the marketing.
We have just under 10 minutes left. I'd like to get to two more audience questions and then finish one for myself. This is kind of a big one. What are the implications for the current online casino operators if iGaming is not part of the bill? Would existing operators of Brazilian iGaming have to shut off operations if this legislation passed? And I think as a sort of related question, another one we received that's on a similar topic, is it possible to obtain a license? Will it be possible to obtain a license in Brazil via a separate company, remain in the offshore market for purposes of offering online casino? Luis, I guess maybe that one for you there. Where would this legislation leave online casino? Would companies have to pull out? Or would it be possible for operators to have one toe in a regulated sports betting market and another in an offshore grey market for casino games?
So that's a very good question, James. It's the law provides for what is called fixed odds lottery. It's loteria de cota fixa. It's fixed odds lottery. And then under the definition of fixed odds lottery, we have sports betting, and the chamber proposed the inclusion of online games, online virtual games. That's the exact word.
Yep.
All prohibitions that are being created relate to fixed odds lottery. Not to online gaming, not to gambling, not to offshore gambling. So, answering your question, and this is my point of view, of course, that will depend on the final version of the bill that is approved, on the law that is approved, on the regulation that is about to be issued. But if online casino is not comprised within the definition of fixed odds lottery, then all the restrictions on the foreign operation of fixed odds lottery will not be applicable to casino.
Understood.
But regarding your second question about the same group having one website for Brazil and another website for the offshore market, I don't think the regulator would allow that.
Interesting. Go ahead, Rafael.
If you allow me just to add something,
Please.
just before the online casino being inserted in the bill, the Minister of Finance was not considering doing that. They were just thinking about regulating sports betting, and we had like we have like many conversations. We had many conversations with them to understand how they would deal exactly with this problem that would have just the allowance for sports betting and the prohibition for iGaming. And at least at that moment, the message that we took from them is that they would not allow a licensed operator to keep on a website of iGaming, even with another brand and in the same structure. So I think that they were already thinking about ways of blocking and shut down or even imposing penalties to the operator, even with the risk of losing the local license. So I think if the legislative is not succeeded in reinserting the iGaming, the government will do it, and even if this means losing a lot of revenue.
Okay, no, that's very helpful. Two last questions then, both of which are big questions that we have to move very quickly on. There is state-level licensing activity happening in Brazil now. Background's too deep to go into, but the Supreme Court has ruled that states and municipalities have equal rights to offer lottery games as the federal government. And so, in a nutshell, we're now seeing Rio de Janeiro and Paraná and Paraíba introduce their own licensing authorization systems for fixed odds lottery games, including sports betting. Will operators be allowed to continue pursuing will state level licensing be able to continue even with a federal bill passed? I mean, Luis, is there a quick answer you can give to that very complicated question?
At the Economic Matters Commission final report, the Article 35G was included, and it provides that the state's lottery cannot accept bets from players outside of the state territory or that are non-residents in the state. I think that's a big change, especially for Rio, because they have the understanding that they can accept bets from all over the country. And there's another provision that states that the same economic group cannot have multiple licenses. They cannot have licenses in different states, or they will not be able to have the federal license, the state license at the same time. I think, again, if this is approved, if this becomes the law, I think that will impact the state license very negatively, because you will not be able to expand your business outside of that state.
That state, no, that's so it's fair to say state level licensing will remain in place, but based on the terms of the bill as approved by the Senate, with significant constraints that may even strangle that market.
Yeah.
One last question from me before I hand over to Jack for some closing remarks. I know we're pushing right up on time. I've been following Brazil for a long time, very much with both of your assistants. Brazil is the sleeping giant of the global gambling industry. In addition to this legislation that is moving through the Congress, there is the bigger gambling bill that's pending in the Senate to regulate land-based casinos, bingo operations, jogo de bicho, and online gaming. Question, I guess, in a as quick an answer as you can give. Do you think that approval of regulation for sports betting will open the door to the eventual further expansion of the Brazilian market to include land-based casinos, bingo, and other forms of gaming? Is that something we can expect in 2024? What's your take on that?
Rafael would like to start.
Yeah, Rafael, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I can do it. I can take it. I see like the stronger the position for the gambling expansion still is in the Senate. It's very clear, especially after yesterday. They have like a more conservative composition. They are well coordinated, especially the detractors are well coordinated. So this is the place where we have to solve this matter. But for me, the Chamber of Deputies is not like a safe ground, but it's easier, more favorable to the subject. And at least to me, I see that is undeniable that the sports betting approval will open a door for casino resorts and other kind of games, especially if we succeed on approving iGaming, because will make no sense like you have allowing online casino and not land-based. So I think that this is an important moment for us, because depending on what is decided in this bill 3626 will be a thermometer for what we can expect, especially in the next year, for the other verticals of gambling.
Luis, closing thoughts really on that subject?
I agree. I think Brazil is not a sleeping giant anymore. I think if much, we are sleepwalking already. We're almost sleep running, because the market is already huge. But I agree with Rafael with one additional remark. I think at the end of the day, this will depend on how much effort the government will be willing to put to get land-based casinos or integrated resort casinos or other game modalities approved. if there's something that we have learned in these 14 years, is that it will only be approved with the blessing of the government, and sometimes with the push from the government. I think by the time they see the revenues coming from the gaming industry, and they feel more comfortable that they can control it, that it's not this wild west that some people think it is, it will probably make them feel like approving the other game modalities. So I think, yes, I think it's definitely going to help.
All right. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. I suspect we can reprise this conversation early in 2024 and have a lot more ground to cover then. So left for me to thank everybody attending this webinar today, and especially to thank you, Luis, and you, Rafael, for your being so gracious with sharing your time and expertise with us today. I will pass back over to Jack for just some concluding remarks. But again, thank you to all, and we will stay tuned over the coming week and beyond as the issues spoken about today continue to evolve in Brazil.
Yeah, thank you, James, and thank you to Rafael and Luis. That was amazing. I'd like to thank everyone for attending and sticking with us to the very end. As mentioned at the start of this webinar, it has been recorded, and a video will be sent to all attendees within 24 hours of the broadcast ending. I just want to mention we received a record number of questions during that broadcast. So I know James went through a few of them. If your question wasn't asked, we will review them and try and get back to you. But what I would suggest, if you are a subscriber of Vixio, we will continue to monitor and report as things develop and become clearer. So if your company does have an account with Vixio, please check out vixio.com. If you don't have an account, please get in touch. We'll provide a demonstration of the platform and share more details with you. Now, before I sign off, I just wanted to tell you about how you can stay in touch with Vixio and the events will be at early 2024. As mentioned, you can visit our website or email us, and we will also be at ICE in London from the 5th to the 8th of February. Please drop by stand at N10 220, where any of the team will be happy to answer any questions you have on Brazil or any other market that you have any queries on. As I mentioned, if we didn't answer your question, or if you do have any other questions about this, what was discussed today, this webinar, anything to do with Vixio, please email info@vixio.com or visit vixio.com for more information. Thank you again.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.